Hey, John, how are you today?
I'm good, Elliot. Unfortunately, we're still at war. And as we're recording this, who knows? So we'll have to keep our tabs on that. But I did want to mention that last night, my wife Sue and I were at the Foley Foundation's annual awards dinner, the Freedom Awards. And just wanted to mention the Foley Foundation. I've talked about this before. And I've actually, if you go back in the archives, interviewed Tom Durkin, who's with the Center for Peacemaking, but also on the Foley Foundation board. He was one of Jim's roommates. Jim Foley was murdered by terrorists in Syria back in 2014, and his mother Diane and father John and others put this foundation together. But I just want to remind people the mission of the foundation is to advocate for American hostages and wrongful detainees held abroad and promote journalist safety, which is just so important. So a number of awards were handed out last night, but the Foley Foundation has some very interesting curriculum about journalist safety. So if you get a chance, go to their website. So I wanted to mention that we were able to participate in that ceremony last night, that dinner last night.
It's an important organization. We talk about a number of other key journalistic organizations, OCCRP and ICIJ, and report on their reporting on a regular basis. The free flow of information from journalists around the globe is critical to anti-corruption efforts and to the rule of law. And John, I applaud your activities in that area and also those of the 3 different organizations that you and I just talked about. So, where would you like to
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate enough to go, but again, the foundation does tremendous work. Why don't we start with our neighbors to the north? We still consider them our good neighbors, and that's Canada. Uh, and mention some of the things going on regarding AML and financial crime there.
Yes, so before I get to AML and financial crime, Karen and I are planning to visit our good neighbors to the north early this summer on a trip, so we too agree with you that they're still our, good friends. So a couple things. One, a bill has been introduced in Canada to establish a financial crime agency, another FCA, so then we'll have more of them, but the idea is to create an enforcement body to tackle financial crime. There's been some criticism about the fact that the way things are organized now with FinTrac and others, that there isn't as much coordination. So this would put everything under one umbrella. It did pass the first reading in Parliament this past week, and it's expected to move forward reasonably quickly because the Liberal Party, who's in governing today, has a majority and is supporting it. So I think that that will be interesting. It will shift the current enforcement model. So currently, FinTrac, the FIU, doesn't carry out arrests or prosecution. It passes the intelligence on to the RCMP, and then under the new framework, FCA would take both roles. And then in addition to that, and I found this to be really interesting, Canada has introduced a proposal to ban crypto ATMs. So the government publishes every year something called the Spring Economic Update. And in that document, they announced that they plan to ban crypto ATMs as part of a wider effort to tackle fraud and money laundering. And so the country currently has almost 4,000 crypto ATMs, which is the highest number per capita globally. But they are seriously moving forward with this effort. They view the ATMs as elements in many frauds. This isn't shutting down crypto. Digital currencies would still be available through brick and mortar money service businesses and other outlets, but not at uh, ATMs. So, and I know you had something else from Canada.
FinTrac has announced this week that they imposed monetary penalties on 3 businesses in the real estate, banking, and dealer in precious metals and precious stone sectors. If you go to the FinTrac website, they list one of them is Burks Group Incorporated. They are a dealer in precious metals. They committed 3 violations, it's being appealed, but a $51,000 fine. Twin City Realty, a real estate brokerage located in Ontario with branches in other places, penalty of 24,000, which is not a lot, but committing 1 violation. The administrative penalty has been paid in full and the case is closed. Third one I have here is Versa Bank, a bank headquartered in London, Ontario. Administrative monetary penalty of 42,000, paid in full, case is closed. So just as we do in the States, whenever you have a penalty, it's always important for training purposes to take a look at what exactly did the entity, what was it accused of? And if the case is closed, what do we learn from that? So again, you can find that on the FinTrac
Yeah,
website.
interesting that those were across 3 different sectors, or each of which you and I have talked about over the years in terms of their risks and how they're dealt with, in the US and in the UK and the EUs.
You have some other things overseas. I think you have
I
something out
did.
of the UK and
Yeah,
Denmark.
so the FCA in the UK published an interesting kind of an update. They're in the process of moving with, and we've talked about this, to a new crypto asset regime regulating the firms in that space. And that becomes fully effective in October of 2027 when the new regulations, the Financial Services and Markets 2000 Crypto Assets Regulations 2026, that's a mouthful, known generally as the FSMA, go into full effect. But this is a reminder to all those organizations that if they're not already registered, how to get registered, if they are registered, if there's additional things they have to do, and to really be developing a realistic implementation plan that is adopted or agreed to at the board level that talks about who's going to be accountable, what will need to change from their current program, how changes will be delivered, and when will the changes be completed. So if you're touched by any of this in the UK, you certainly should take a look at it. Again, I think it's always good, regardless of where you are, to take a look at what the major regulators around the globe are doing, because it's always a hint about how you might want to do it. The next thing I saw was that the FIU in Denmark, which is the Financial Supervisory Authority, or FSA, has indicated that it asked Danish police to investigate whether Nordea Bank has failed to comply with Danish money laundering regulations on customer due diligence. So in the statement that FSA released, it said that Nordea did not have sufficient knowledge of individuals within a larger group of customers who were issued credit cards. So a lot of know your customer issues there. It also indicated that it assessed that there was systemic deficiency, not two good words to hear about your institution, and notes that that Nordea did not have sufficient information to assess the purpose and intended use of the various business relationships. So again, know your customer. So something to watch. And again, as you mentioned earlier, something to think about in terms of your own organization. And then lastly, Europol has launched an EU anti-scam platform. And the focus here is to share intelligence on scam activity that Europol collects and be sure that it moves out to financial services companies across the EU to give them additional tools to interdict scams. And so the platform's pillars are maximizing intelligence sharing, swift reactions to intercept and recover stolen funds, operational coordination, threat monitoring, public-private and and prevention, all things that you and I talk about regularly and that we're seeing being thought about, talked about, and acted on globally.
Couple of other items to mention. There's an organization called the Anti-Corruption Data Collective, and they've done a recent analysis of the prediction markets, which we've talked about. And according to one of the researchers, and you can look this up on their website. They found that 52% of long shot bets in military and defense markets on Polymarket win. Their research is across all markets, only 14% of long shots are correct. And again, according to the researcher, that's in line with expectations. So imagine only one or two of your underdogs win, but someone's getting them all right just before a game, and they use the analysis of the World Cup or March Madness, whatever. Then they go on to say that what's concerning is the data is public and transparent. There's no secrets. If people, though, are using confidential information for personal financial gains, they're doing it in the open because there's no limitation on this yet. And then they also sort of call out the Commodities Future Trading Commission because they have the authority to say betting on war isn't in the public interest, ending these prediction markets. From that particular area of concern, this is something to watch. I know that the Senate in the United States just did a rule. I think it's a rule. I forget exactly how the process goes, prohibiting members of the Senate or their staffs to bet in these prediction markets. So that's helpful, but I think the suggestion from the data collective is much more needs to be done. They're an NPO based in Washington D.C. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. So I wanted to mention that. Also, a couple things. Our good friend Guy Fico, who just retired from IRSCI, is now with Castellanos. He received an award in the past week or so from the AML intelligence folks. So we wanted to mention that at the conference that he was at. He well deserved another acknowledgement. We were able to, we meaning the AML Partnership Forum, recognize Guy's career work as well. So happy to see that the guy was also recognized from AML intelligence, and really happy for him. And we certainly are going to effort to get some conversations with him when he's got some time to talk about his post career. And then I wanted to mention, for those of you that have been involved in white collar crime for years, certainly understand the value proposition of the racketeering statutes created in the United States in the 70s. The author of those states has just passed away, Bob Blakey. Bob Blakey was a professor at Notre Dame, hired by by Congress. I can't remember House or Senate, and put together the RICO statutes to be used to deal with not just dealing with organized crime, but to go any sort of other organized criminal activities. He passed away. He was 90. Good long life. But those of us that have been in this space for a long time will remember the name Bob Blakey. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And the work that he's done still has fundamentally changed criminal law jurisprudence, at least to date. So it's still a statute that can be used to go after all sorts of white collar criminals.
And you also pointed out something to me from the Manhattan DA's office.
Right. You know, as we've been doing for a number of years in our conversations in a separate podcast, highlighting the concern with the theft and use for illicit purposes of antiquities. And the office that's actually so involved, the lead office probably in the world, is the Manhattan DA's office. And Alvin Bragg just announced that they have returned over 650 antiquities to India. The press release goes into detail about the work they did. DHS was involved, other agencies as well. But that particular office in Manhattan has really been a leader in this particular area. And to learn more about it, besides going on their website, you should also go to the Antiquities Coalition website, which has a lot of great information about this and other related topics.
So, John, you want to talk about this month's webinar?
Well, let me do this right before we do this. Couple
Okay.
things that we wanted to also highlight. One is because it's relevant to the compliance regulatory world, and that is the Justice Department has finally decided to drop its investigation and potential prosecution against Chairman Jerome Powell. I will say my view, a totally manufactured case because the administration wanted him to reduce reduce rates. Bottom line is, because a member of the Senate said he would not support the administration's replacement of Powell as chair until they dropped this case was in fact dropped. The Justice Department this week moved to vacate that ruling that had blocked the subpoenas to the Federal Reserve. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues. I know you have some thoughts on that as well, but I did want to mention that and then add whatever you want. And then I want to one more point.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how this works. I mean, Chairman Powell has made a couple of public statements indicating that, he was going to stay at the Fed. We've talked about this too. He has his term as a governor continues beyond his term as chair, and he has indicated that he will likely stay on the Federal Reserve Board in part because he wants to be sure that this investigation truly is done. And I haven't been able to sort of parse out yet how this is all going to work. And the judge, presumably, this is a motion before the court. The judge can deny it. So I don't know what the Justice Department's reaction would be. I guess they would leave it there. They certainly have indicated they're not planning now to appeal. I don't know. It's a little confounding to me, but it might be because my federal court skills are pretty rusty.
Right, and as everybody knows, we record these midweek, so by Friday, things can always
Right.
change. I did want to add that Kevin Warsh, who is the nominee to become chairman of the Fed, was asked during his testimony, among many, many other things, whether or not he could say that President Biden won the 2020 election, and he refused. The reason I mentioned that is because there also was a series of judicial nominees who actually are trying to get lifetime appointments who at a Senate hearing last week, after questioning by Senator Coons of Delaware, all of them said the same thing, that it had been certified. They would not say that President Biden won the election. I really have a hard time understanding how we got here, but it is very concerning. The Democrats have no ability to stop these nominees. These are judges, again, for lifetime appointments who couldn't say that. I think it's more than concerning. So I wanted to mention that. And then you asked me what's going on this month. May 28th, we're doing what I'm really excited about, a webinar that's going to focus on financial access challenges domestically and globally. And we have three panelists that are going to give us perspectives from Capitol Hill, from groups that have difficulty getting these, and from organizations that have done a lot of research in this space. And as of course, we will take your questions. So really looking forward to that because this continues to be a major challenge for both the industry as our colleagues try to figure out how to navigate these issues. And of course, for humanitarian groups that obviously need financial access for medical supplies, for food, water, all sorts of things like that we talked about constantly. So really looking forward to sort of setting the stage and offering potential additional recommendations to how to navigate this going forward.
And you can register for the webinar at our website. And as John mentioned, it'll live stream at 1 p.m. Eastern time on May 28th. And John, I know your conversation about April with Sarah Beth Felix will have posted to our website by the time this episode is available, so people should listen to that. Always good insight, a good conversation between the two of you and good insights. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah. I was going to say that I sat down with Dan Stepano and Rick Small under the Davis Polk, Dan's law firm umbrella, and we did a webinar further talking about the AML program rule. And if you go on their website, Davis Polk, or on LinkedIn, either myself, Rick, or Dan, you can sign up for it. The webinar is done, so you just register and you can get the recording. So that's out too. And then I'm efforting a conversation at the end of May with a clear expert on anti-corruption who I've worked with over many years, who teaches this at a number of schools and law schools and other colleges and universities. And so we're working on those dates and at the end of the month conversation. So something that we'll obviously post sometime in June. But obviously my goal is always with these conversations to get where are we? What are the recommendations? And give us some operational and practical advice to navigate all of this.
So, John, you have a great rest of the week. I know you're coming to Milwaukee for a quick trip. You and I are going to connect, but if not, I will talk to you next week.
Take care. Stay
You
safe.
too. Bye-bye.